I'm joined now by our Conservative representative, Conservative Party Chair, Kevin Hollinrake is here with me this morning. Very good morning to you. Let's start with that latest poll, shall we? Because you were saying there that it's bad news for Labour. They're down 1 point at 20%, but if it's bad for them, it's even worse for you, isn't it? Down 1 point at 17%.
Yeah, we're nowhere near where we need to be. We're not even on the pitch yet in terms of taking the fight to reform, certainly. Certainly Labour, we've done an awful lot in terms of holding them to account. But certainly we have an awful lot of work to do. What Kemi Badenoch, our leaders, said she would do is take time to get our policies right, rather than rush out policies that can't be delivered upon, which of course resulted in some of the lack of the trust we saw in previous administrations. Take time to make sure we get our policies right. So I think what people will see over the next few weeks, particularly at conference, roll out our policies, which we already have done to a certain extent on things like deportation, the deportation bill, but things like the European Convention on Human Rights, that work's going on right now. So I think more and more people will see Kemi Badenoch as a strong person we need to lead this country. OK, but some people say, well, maybe we're waiting too long when you've got Reform bringing out all their announcements. So let's just see what your reaction is to what they said about migration. You talked about their plans for mass deportation. So do you welcome their ideas, or do they go too far in your view? I welcome many of their ideas because they're stolen directly from our playbook. I mean, if you remember only a few months ago, Nigel Farage's solution to migration, illegal migration, the boats coming over the Channel, was to tow them back to France. We said that wouldn't work. We put together our deportation bill, which included deporting people to a third country, as we had planned in the previous Parliament. Now look where he's gone to. He's moved from that position and realised he can't do that. He's copied our plans and now has come to the same conclusion. So yes, I'm not saying presentationally he doesn't come across, and people do. He tells people what they want to hear, and so he definitely is cutting through. But nevertheless, what you've got to look at Nigel Farage is in the context of these plans are not his; he's stolen from us. But also the fact there's other promises. I mean, there's £120 billion a year of excess spending promises he's made. It was simply bankrupt the country. He would say he's just exploiting your party's failure to deliver. The Tories said they bring down migration and they failed. Well, the reality is, look at his plans. Look, so Nigel Farage's plans, including a new British Bill of Rights. It was to replace the European Convention on Human Rights. That's exactly what we had planned. But the reality in Parliament, that takes time, and you'd face massive opposition in Parliament to that, including in the Lords. So it's easy to announce policies. Delivering on the ground is much more difficult. OK, so what would you do when it comes to human rights in this country? Reform are saying that they'll leave the European Convention on Human Rights, they'll leave the UN Convention for Refugees as well. Will the Conservatives commit to the same thing? Well, already in May, we've already announced that we would disapply the Human Rights Act, which is effectively... Yeah, but what about the European Convention on Human Rights? But the Human Rights Act basically embodies the principles of the European Convention in UK law. That's what happens. So we've already said we'll disapply that in immigration cases. Now, in the wider context of the European Convention on Human Rights, because it has some other implications as well, in terms of foreign national offenders, for example. So what we're doing in that case is we've asked Lord Wolfson, one of the most eminent lawyers in this country, to look at this, properly look at the implications of leaving the European Convention on Human Rights, and then in time, in the next few weeks, you'll see an announcement in terms of our plans for that. But Kemi Badenoch has already said she's minded to leave. I think that will probably be the position, but let's see where we go to on that. But what you can be assured from our approach, it will be properly considered, and we'll consider the other implications of leaving that kind of legislation. UN Refugee Convention? Again, all these things are under consideration. So you will make an announcement on the UN Refugee Convention? We'll make announcements on our immigration policy, but nothing will stop us from stopping those small boats coming over the Channel. That is our commitment. OK, and you say that Reform are stealing your ideas. Would you like them set up a returns agreement to Afghanistan? Would you do a deal with the Taliban? Well, that's one of the reasons we looked at the Rwanda plan. I mean, in fact, we wanted to implement the Rwanda plan against lots of protests, outcry from the media and other politicians about that. But because it's very difficult to do a deal with the Taliban, of course, or the Ayatollah in Iran, so we had a solution for that, which involved a third country our chosen country was Rwanda, where we deport people who couldn't be deported to their home country, a third country solution. That's a better way of doing that. Otherwise, if you're simply going to go to the Taliban and say, we need to do a deal with you at all costs, we have no other option, that's going to be very expensive, and the potential human rights consequences for those individuals are very significant.
Well, yes. I mean, what's your objection then? Is it the practicalities of it? It's very difficult to do a deal with the Taliban, or do you have a sort of a moral objection to it?
Of course I have a moral objection with sending people back to somewhere they'd be tortured, particularly if people, for example, have served as part of our armed forces in Afghanistan, Afghan interpreters.
So those people wouldn't be included?
Well, I mean, is he honestly saying that people who've served this country as an interpreter or other roles within our armed forces, within our operations overseas, and we're not going to make sure they're properly looked after? And that was about the third country status, the third country solution with somewhere like Rwanda. So, I mean, it is not simply the European Convention on Human Rights that prevents us subjecting people to torture. There's common law dating back hundreds of years. So it's not, you can't just leave the European Convention on Human Rights, think the courts will be happy with the situation where people will be tortured in the nation you return them to.
One last quick question about Britain's relationship with the EU. The government announced its reset earlier this summer, and some of its temporary arrangements, which they hope to make some of those deals permanent. Nigel Farage says he wants to reverse that reset and tear up the agreement. Nick Thomas-Symonds for the government is saying that means he wants to see British business fail. Do you agree with him on that? What's your position?
No, I don't. I mean, the thing is, I mean, it was always going to be difficult leaving the European Union. There is a price to pay for everything. The closer you align to the European Union, the more difficult it is to do deals with other countries. That's the reality. So instead of being a rule maker, you become a rule taker. What Labour's suggesting is that they all become rule takers from the European Union. And when we left the European Union, that's not what people wanted, in my view. So no, now, because we've left the European Union, we managed to strike trade deals with many nations across the world, Australia, New Zealand, Canada, and in the Pacific region. All that is at risk if you too closely align with the European Union, and certainly would very much affect our chances of striking a trade deal with the United States.
OK, Kevin Hollinrake, we're out of time, but we appreciate you coming in this morning.
Pleasure, thank you.